right, Matt, we're getting to the end of 3 cards in 8 days with a crazy main event between the Demolition Man, Alistair Overeem, and the big ticket Walt Harris. I'm going to start the 5-minute main event timer here because Alistair Overeem and Walt Harris is a predicting nightmare dream. It really is. I mean, what are you going to get in this one? Because you got Alistair Overeem, whose chin hasn't held up, but at the same time, he's had over 60 professional fights, nearing 70 professional fights. He's taken on Walt Harris, who's had 21 fights, and he's been in the UFC since 2013, which a lot of people might not think about. It's just a weird one just coming together here.
It really is. So I hate it when you have to say that a fighter has a glass chin, because it feels like you're sort of disrespecting them because it's nothing that they can really handle. But it's kind of been the case of Alistair Overeem throughout his career, whether it's been kickboxing, whether it's been MMA. The Achilles heel of Alistair Overeem is when he eats a clean shot, he usually goes down. Now, we saw that in his last fight against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He was doing amazing for 4.5 rounds. Well, 4 rounds and 50 seconds, pretty much. And then Jairzinho only needed 2 punches. One to stun him and one to put him down. You can say what you want about that stoppage, but it still has to be brought up that he just got stopped in his last fight, and it wasn't that long ago. I know Alistair Overeem is capable of fighting in many different styles. I mean, we saw in the Mark Hunt fight, he was very clinch heavy. He threw a lot of really good knees, Muay Thai knees. We saw that in the Olynyk fight too. In the Verdum fight, a little bit more reserved. A lot of people thought he lost it, but still.
In the Sergey Pavlovich fight, heavy hands, get him down into a good position, finish him.
It was more about his ground and pound, and that's the thing people don't realize. Alistair Overeem is a phenomenal grappler. It's just his striking so good, he doesn't ever have to fall back on it. It's a terrible idea for Alistair Overeem if he tries to strike with Walt Harris. Now, you're probably thinking, though, well, wait, Alistair Overeem's a much better striker than Walt Harris, World Grand Prix, or K1 Grand Prix champ, fought Badr Hari, knocked him out. When you have all those fights, though, you take a lot of damage. And the problem at this stage in his career is Alistair Overeem's taken more damage than pretty much any other MMA fighter I can think of. He's been knocked out almost 20 times between his kickboxing and MMA career. And not to say that he's not still extremely skilled, it's just when we talk about Achilles heels, that's one of the bigger ones an MMA fighter can have. I mean, Tony Ferguson, half the reason he's so good is he can just take a ridiculous shot. If Alistair Overeem had that capability to recover, he'd probably be the greatest fighter of all time. But the problem is when you're so good at everything else, you have to have one weakness. And unfortunately for him, fighting in the heavyweight division, he just can't take a shot very well.
It's crazy that Alistair Overeem, like you said, he's been there and done that with K1, with Pride, with Strikeforce, with the UFC. And listen, he's won championships here and there. Maybe not, like he hasn't won the big one in the UFC. Yeah, he had that fight against Stipe. Did he tap? Probably not. But it's crazy to think that Alistair Overeem is almost 40 years old. He's 39 and 11 months. Walt Harris is almost 37, and he's had less than half of the fights, like around a third of the fights that Alistair Overeem has had. So it's crazy just to put those two things into perspective. Now, Alistair Overeem in the UFC has pretty much fought the way better competition. Oh, yeah. Alistair Overeem, since he's been around with the UFC, it's pretty well been the upper echelon of the top 10. And yes, I realize, the Pavlovich fight, but that was coming off of a number of losses and finish losses at that. I mean, he was taking on guys like Curtis Blades and Francis Ngannou, who are also at the top of the division. And again, Rozenstruik, who is featuring against Francis Ngannou, UFC 249. And you're probably watching this after the fact. You know how it ended, but we're doing it before, so who knows? But Alistair Overeem and Walt Harris, it's just an interesting fight because Walt Harris, we've seen the flashes of brilliance. Yeah. We've also seen no contests. Wins that are no contest, what have you. We've seen losses to some fighters that maybe shouldn't have lost to. What do you expect in this one from Walt Harris?
So, X's and O's wise, and I think I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, and I don't even know if I'm right by saying it. I think Walt Harris knocks out Alistair Overeem fairly early, but I really think that that's his only path to victory. If Overeem is able to ground and pound, wear him out, take away some of that knockout power. I know Rozenstruik was able to knock him out in the last 5 seconds, but you can't assume that's going to repeat in this fight. It's just such a Hail Mary that you don't really assume that's going to happen in this. But Walt Harris does have that X factor. Very fast starter. The majority of his wins are by first round knockout. And if Alistair Overeem isn't careful, I don't think it's going to be a Francis Ngannou-esque knockout. I don't think he's going to get hurt that badly. But I do think Walt Harris is the type of guy who's just dangerous enough on the feet. And here's the thing that people don't mention. He was a really good college basketball player. And Walt Harris is an absurd athlete for the size of him. He throws jumping head kicks like... He has an athletic ability that not many heavyweights can really match.
Walt Harris, and I know you could say, well, it didn't really matter. Go back to the Mark Godbeer fight if you want to look at a Walt Harris fight. His right cross to end that fight.
Left high kick was...
Yeah, that too. Pretty good. But Walt Harris, in terms of the striking, in terms of the distance management, does a great job of it. I mean, he's not one of those guys that has to get really close into the pocket. He can kind of do it in all different aspects. And like you said, a very, very athletic heavyweight. Even up there in years, he's able to do things that you don't see a lot of guys in the division do. Another thing to bring in, I mean, in terms of the odds, Walt Harris coming in as a favorite here. -155 favorite. Alistair Overeem at a +130. over on Tapology, limited sample size right now, but out of 211 votes, 65% going with Walt Harris, 92% of them predicting a knockout win. Do you agree with the fans and the odds makers?
I do, and you hate it when I do this. I think Alistair Overeem, in every aspect of MMA, is probably a little bit better than Walt Harris. He's just a more well-rounded martial artist. But the fact that his chin is so poor at the stage of his career, I think that kind of takes away from all the really good skills that he has. Because even if Walt Harris cracks him one time and wobbles him, we've seen it in Overeem's fights. For instance, in the Stipe fight, he got off to a really good start, dropped Stipe, but once Stipe was starting to get a little bit of traction, Overeem's not a type of guy who can lose the first couple rounds and then come back. He's kind of like BJ Penn in that respect, where if you get off to a great start, you're just going to keep on doing really, really well. But BJ, back in his prime, he was really bad at coming back from a deficit, and Overeem's kind of in that same boat at this stage of his career. I think there's a very good chance Overeem goes out there, wrestles Walt Harris, does a really good job. All that being said, though, Walt Harris only needs one punch, and you could say that about anybody, but I think he's going to get it. I think he's going to get done in the first round, which is kind of a crazy prediction. But I'm going to say Walt Harris by first round knockout. And I think there's a good possibility of it happening.
Matt, commenters have said different things about you. And you might not see those comments because I respond to your comments. So it's me. You can direct the flack at me. I consider you a wild man in some of these comments. And that pick is the pick of a wild man. And an absolute wild card.
But it's true. Like, Overeem is a better kickboxer.
Yeah.
He's faster.
Yep.
He's probably a little bit more heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Throws more kicks.
Yeah.
He's better at jiu-jitsu.
For those reasons, he's going to win.
For those reasons, he's probably going to get knocked out in the first round, unfortunately.
So we'll have to wait and see. And, yeah.
Who's your prediction?
I'm taking Alistair Overeem to win this one. And I think he's going to be able to at least... Maybe it won't be the first round. I know I keep bringing the Pavlovich fight up because that was a heavy-handed guy from Fight Nights Global. I think it really is. And I mean, it was a guy, he was really active for a time, a little bit of time off before his UFC debut. But I think in terms of skill sets and intangibles, I think somewhat similar. And again, this is a fight, too, between Overeem and Harris that was booked for December 2019. Obviously, unfortunate circumstances that we have to talk about. The passing of Walt Harris' stepdaughter. And as unfortunate as it was rebooked for this spring, not once, but twice. Now we get it as the main event here. So hopefully we get 100% on both sides. But again, all things created equal, I'm taking Alistair Overeem.
It's just kind of nice that the UFC stuck to their word and still gave Walt Harris a main event. I think he's going to get it done. It'd be a really nice story, too, if he is able to come back and knock out Overeem. And both guys really need this win because Walt Harris doesn't have a name like Alistair Overeem on his resume yet. And Alistair Overeem, we talk about inconsistency at this point in his career. If he suffers another knockout loss, I'm not saying it's it for Overeem because there's always going to be a market for him, but that's probably going to be it for, okay, Overeem only needs 1-2 wins that he can get a title shot. It's probably it for his title aspirations in the UFC, which is unfortunate to say. I think we're going to get a great fight nonetheless.
Yeah, so let's see what we get. A lot of cards coming up. We've got another May card that's rumored to be taking place later on, so you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. Check out the rest of the predictions for this card. 2 minutes for the prelims plus, 2 minutes for the main card plus, and 5 minutes plus for our main event. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Lots of fights coming up, and as we always say, Matt, Fight Night picks, let's get into it.